Hello, my name is Paul Henderson, and I'm going to talk to you today about a recent diagnosis I've had. And this diagnosis is of a disease called multiple myeloma, a form of cancer. And as you probably know, I'm a therapist and I train therapists for a living. But this is different in a way. It's a lot more personal, this talk, and I'd like to share my journey throughout the next few months regarding the treatment of this multiple myeloma and how I found out about it and how it affects me with existential and emotional issues and levels. So, up until recently, I was feeling somewhat tired, fatigued. And I've been feeling this way for a couple of years, and I put it nothing down to more than perhaps mental tiredness, mental fatigue. I do a lot of mental work and physical tiredness. I was also getting some achiness in the bones, especially when I've been out on a good walk. And some days that was worse than others. But apart from some tiredness and some achiness of the bones, I had no other symptoms whatsoever. So therefore, I put it down, quite frankly, to getting older, nothing more. Anyway, a few weeks ago, I had this bug and went on throughout the summer, went on for about 6 weeks. I had this cough. I was get slightly dizzy spells at times, but this cough that seemed a dry cough, and I was getting pains in my back because I was coughing, especially of a night time. My breath was labouring about night time, and it wasn't too bad, being honest. Again, I put it down to some sort of virus, and eventually I phoned the doctors, and the doctor gave me antibiotics, and they didn't work. Anyway, I had to speak to the doctor quite luckily a couple of weeks later, and I mentioned this tiredness and this so-called virus that had been going on for about 6 weeks, and she said, "Oh, we need to do blood tests." So she done a couple of preliminary blood tests and got back to me quite fast. She said one of two of your readings, your blood counts are high. She said, I suggest that we take a deeper look and take more blood tests. Anyway, the blood test results come back very fast the same day, and she said, we have cause for concern here. She said, it could be something, it may not be, but we definitely need to investigate further. And thankfully we did, because I got an urgent appointment with the haematology department in the cancer unit at Glenclwyd Hospital here in North Wales. And I must say, the service I got and the treatment I got was fantastic. First, I went in, I was waiting in the waiting room for my appointment, which was an emergency appointment. And I was talking to a chap who had had leukemia for a couple of years. And I said to him, what symptoms did you have? And he said, none but tiredness. So first of all, it just shows you how these symptoms can escape you and go on for years. And the disease probably can progress without you knowing for a good number of years. So I consider myself lucky. So alarm bells started going off when he told me of his symptoms. Anyway, I was called in to see the main consultant, and he asked me lots of personal questions, family history. And then he said to me, I'm going to be very straight with you now. He said, you've got a disease, a cancerous disease called multiple myeloma. And he explained what it was, and I must say they were fantastic. I mean, I have got so many different booklets to tell me what was going on, what exactly it is, because quite frankly, I may have been a therapist for years, but I'd never heard of myeloma. Apparently, it's one of the more rare cancers in this country. And it just tells you here, if I just open up, I'm quite a lay person in this area. So it just says melanoma is a type of cancer arising from plasma cells that are normally found in the bone. So he told me this information, and he said, it's not curable. In other words, it's a terminal illness. He said, but I want you to remember these words very clearly before you go. He said, it's a very treatable illness. Well, I was admitted into the hospital that day. Um, I had to have a bone marrow biopsy. I had to have an MRI scan. I had to have an ultrasound scan on my heart. Quite frankly, I went through an array of tests. And again, the cancer unit, the Elvis ward in the cancer unit here at Glenclwyd, I couldn't be more grateful to the staff. If I'd have paid privately for that, I don't think I'd have got that service. It was second to none. So the first thing I'd like to do is thank the staff there. Obviously, when you're told something like this, your whole life is thrown into disarray. I could sit here and I could seem to be cool, calm, and collected. Try to put the therapist sort of persona out there. It's a thing I don't do anyway. But obviously, my mind was thrown into array. I did suspect something, obviously, to get emergency appointments like that doesn't come easy. To be admitted to hospital, thankfully, the same day and get all the tests I needed, um, to confirm it was multiple myeloma was just fantastic service. But then all of these things, you question your own mortality. One minute you're thinking you're just tired, you've got a few achy bones. The next minute you're questioning your mortality. Is this fatal? Is something imminent? And thank goodness the staff of the hospital could answer my every question. And I found out, as the consultant Dr. Harton said to me, it's a very treatable illness. From what I can gather, it's a disease basically that starts in the bone marrow. It's a blood disease that starts in the bone marrow, and it starts to. One of the blood tests that were very high for me was the calcium levels were extremely high in my blood counts. And apparently, what this does, there's calcium in the bones, and these cancerous cells eat away at your bones in your skeleton, basically. Pieces of calcium break off into the bloodstream, and it's very dangerous when we get high levels because it can cause seizures. It can block up your kidneys, for instance. So the first objective for the hospital for me were to try and lower my calcium levels in my blood. They struggled a little bit with IV, intravenous saline drips. Saline drips. They were at first they come down from 2.9 to 2.7. They cut down the saline drips, then it went up again. So they put me on some medication called Zamita, and apparently that one of the functions of Zamita is to bring down your calcium levels. Unfortunately, at the hospital, I also contracted COVID, and after 8 days in, I was supposed to start my treatment, which I'll tell you a little bit about in a second. But unfortunately, I could only have part of my treatment, and I was sent home. Nowadays, they send you home with COVID. They want you out the hospital, unfortunately, which it was okay for me. I got what treatment I could have before I left. And my actual chemo regime, I'll tell you more about that in a second, is now being postponed until next week. But back to these existential issues, your mortality. Am I going to die imminently? Shall I revisit my will? I'm often a carer for my mum. What will happen to my mum? She's 85 years of age. I've got a fantastic family. I've got a sister there who come up from 250 miles away, and a brother-in-law who's like a brother to me. They picked her up. They brought me to my place in Wales. They visited me every day. So my support network has been fabulous. All the students, even on all the courses I've done for many, many years, were offering support. I live in North Wales. My mum lives in Liverpool. They were offering to go and get shopping for my mum, to go and visit my mum, to come up and visit me. So I think another really important thing when this happens is a support network. Now, I'm going to be very honest with you here now. I'm a therapist. I train therapists for a living. I am, but when I was in hospital, it's overwhelming. I had courses starting this week. I was rushed into hospital. I didn't know what for. I didn't know how my cancer treatments, I still don't really, was going to pan out. How long did I have left? All of these questions come. And I want to relay some very important things, I think. One, it was overwhelming at first. Two, I had brand new courses starting at the beginning of September. Well, now in September, I had to organise other lecturers to do them for me. Very, very good people who were very supportive and there to help me instantly. And thanks to them people, to Nick and Nicola. I am and then you've got all of these questions about the disease. So really you're thrown into a spin. You're thrown into this melee of confusion. But what I want to say is important. As human beings, we are taught to keep, especially English, keep a stiff upper lip. Freud said um, that human beings are highly defensive organisms. And what we tend to do is we stuff all of our fears down deep within us and we put on this face. And we call that repression. When we repress our mind, often when it gets a shock, will repress, it will push down information into the unconscious mind so we can't remember it sometimes. If it's suppressed, we can remember it. If it's repressed, we can't remember it. The shock will keep it down. It's a form of defense mechanism. But information that is pushed down into our unconscious is not dead and buried. It's buried alive. And mark my words, if we don't use expressionistic therapy like Gestalt, if we don't express our fears, phobias, worries, and so on, they're going to come back in other forms. Addictions, depression, mood swings. So I knew I had to cry, not be the big therapist. After 2 days of this build-up of confusion and this melee inside of me, I knew I had to cry. And I even went into a toilet in there, tried to make myself cry, and I couldn't. But when my family come in, eventually it all come out, and I couldn't work out. I've got no control over what happens to my health in the future. I leave that in the good hands of the people I know. I am, and I'll come to them in a minute. This team that are looking after me, what a fantastic thing. But I had to cry. The only thing I could do at that point is release my authentic emotion, and that's to cry. It's not often I do that nowadays, but I knew it had to come out, and I cried with my family. They cried too. So this release, this expressionistic act of releasing emotion is cathartic. And once I'd released that emotion, the confusion started to die down. My logical mind was able to take over and I was able to think things through. So please do not be as scared to cry when you get these diagnoses. It's natural to do these things. So back to myeloma, which I want to take you on a journey, like I say, from before I got diagnosed to my wonderful journey through into the hospital that was organised by so many medical professionals who were fantastic, and the speed it happened was phenomenal. It really was. It says when you've got something like this, all the professionals, I've looked up a lot, I've watched a lot of stuff. They say it's very important to get a strong team behind you. And I've got a fantastic consultant, registrars, I've got a key worker nurse. I've been invited by Dr. Harton onto a clinical trial where I'm going to have stem cell transplantations at Christie's Hospital in Manchester. But I'll tell you more about that in a minute. There's a lot to go through here. So, first of all, back to the myeloma. What's it doing? Well, as far as I know, these rogue cells, these cancerous cells, start to eat into your bones. And calcium breaks off into your bloodstream. This is one of the effects of it. This is what's happening with me. And that can block up vital organs and cause seizures. So I need treatment. First of all, my tests, I had an MRI scan, and the results of the MRI scan I've got here, which again I'd like to share with you because I think these are important things to get. You'll get a discharge letter from the hospital, and it says test results. This is what it says here: MRI whole body MR. It said recent diagnosis is multiple myeloma. There is a heterogeneity, something like that, and focalitic bone lesions throughout the visualized marrow. There are multiple vertebral lesions, the largest within T8, with mild biconcave collapse. There is an anterior wedge collapse of L1 with mild narrowing and central canal. I don't want to really go through all of them, but basically what they said is the myeloma, the cancer, the MRI showed up is right throughout my skeleton. Okay. No wonder my calcium levels were high, and if they weren't, I probably never would have ended up in hospital. It was my doctor who was fantastic, who pushed and pushed for so many urine tests because it shows up there as well, and blood tests, and she was on the phone every day for about 5 days and made sure I got this emergency appointment at the hospital where I've met this fantastic team now. And I must admit, my outlook today has been highly positive. I'm digesting the information. I know it's a highly treatable form of the illness, not curable though, getting close, but it's very subjective as well. How the treatments work is very subjective. So the advice lots of knowledgeable people, doctors and so on, consultants, give on the likes of YouTube and at the clinics is that to take on a treatment that uses an eclectic mix, if you like, of drugs, so they can throw different things at the disease and see what's working. And then they do this in cycles, and they'll change the cycle and adjust the cycle in accordance to the information and the progress you're making with each medication. So just on medications, let's just have a little look at what I'm going to have. And I don't know a lot about medications. I mean, my background is in psychodynamic counselling and integrative counselling. So medicine really is not my big forte. But just quickly, here's some of the drugs they're going to use when I start my treatment next week. The dexamethasone is a steroid. I'm already on that, and to be quite honest with you, it fills you full of energy, and it also causes insomnia. So I slept for 4 hours last night when I got home from the hospital. And I've been awake and I've been working since 5 o'clock this morning because the effects are quite sharp, I'm finding, of the dexamethasone. And it also, talking about side effects, I find this one a useful one. I wanted that boost of energy, which it gave me. I'll probably be shattered later, but I wanted that boost of energy. It also, I think it's the dexamethasone that I'm getting like a metallic taste in my mouth as well. But I'm only on these for 4 days. So this is a temporary. So how does work. It mimics the action of a naturally occurring hormone produced in the body. It is effective at killing myeloma cells and can make other anti-myeloma drugs work better. Dexamethasone can also prevent inflammation, which can help to reduce the pain associated with myeloma bone disease. So that's one of the treatments I'm going to start next Tuesday. Right, let's have a look. I said we get an eclectic mix here. So here's the next one, and I hope I'm going to pronounce these okay. It's cyclophosphamide, I think, this next one. This is a chemotherapy drug. Okay, let's see what this is going to do. It's like they bombard the disease from many different levels. So cyclophosphamide works by damaging the DNA within myeloma cells, the cancerous cells. Damaging the DNA stops the myeloma cells multiplying and results in their death. Okay, so that's that one. We're going to hit them with that one as well. Again, that one's called cyclophosphamide. This next one is related to the drug thalidomide, and this one's called lenalidomide. Let's have a look what this does. This is a targeting drug, this one. So how does it work? Lenalidomide works by affecting the body's immune system. It helps to kill myeloma cells in a number of different ways. One, directly killing or stopping the growth of myeloma cells. Two, blocking the growth of new blood vessels that supply the myeloma cells with oxygen and nutrition. Three, boosting the immune response against the myeloma cells. Four, altering the production of chemical messages involved in the growth of survival of myeloma cells. Five, preventing the myeloma cells from sticking to the bone stroma, stroma being the tissue and cells not involved in blood cell production. So that's going to be the third treatments they're going to throw at it next week. And this, by the way, is all called an induction treatment. And in the induction treatment, they'll give me these drugs on 21-day cycles, and there'll be 4 cycles. So they'll give me an initial cycle with these 4 drugs, and then if I'm high risk, they'll introduce another one. I forget the name of that at the moment, but for high risk patients, they do this by looking at, I think it's the genetics of your bone marrow, but please don't quote me on that. I'm not no experience. When the biopsy comes back, 15 to 20% of people, the normal treatments may not work as well. So they call you high risk. And if you're high risk, in the second cycle, they'll introduce another drug. So this phase I'm going to start next week is called the induction period, really. The induction treatment lasts for 12 weeks and it's in 4 cycles. Each cycle can be adjusted in proportion with how well the drugs are working. This is another target drug. I think this is bortezomib. Okay, so let's have a look at that. Bortezomib works by blocking the actions of proteasomes. Proteasomes are large molecules found in all cells of the body, and they are involved in the breakdown of damaged or unwanted proteins. Bortezomib temporarily blocks their function, stopping them from breaking down unwanted proteins. This causes proteins to build up to toxic levels, killing the cells. Myeloma cells rely more heavily on proteasomes as they produce more proteins than normal healthy cells. They are therefore much more sensitive to bortezomib. Again, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. So they're the 4 drugs that they're going to use initially. The fifth one that they may introduce if I'm high risk, begins with an I, but I haven't got that to hand at the moment. So I will update you. I'll keep doing these for anybody who's got this disease, and I'll let you know how I'm getting on with treatments as we go by. So after the induction treatments, I'm going to go on a trial at Christie's in Manchester. I think this trial is only open to about 40% of people that have multiple myeloma. You've got to be reasonably fit because I think it's quite aggressive. There's quite an aggressive chemo um, component. So you've got to be quite fit, I think. Which I do walk a lot, I walk a lot and I have pain afterwards. I do swim, which is very good for this. I keep myself reasonably healthy. So after I've had this induction period, I'm going to go into Christie's for the cell stem transplants. As far as I know, with stems, they can become different types of blood cells, like platelets and red blood cells and white blood cells. Now, when I get this aggressive chemotherapy in Christie's, not only will it kill off the cancer, it's its job, it will probably almost wipe out my immune system. So I'm going to be very, very volatile. And this is why it's very, very important to have the cell stem transplantation, because what this will do is restore the good blood cells and my immune system back in my body. So as far as I know, thus far, I'm going to learn with you people because we can go on a journey together. And please do subscribe to the channel and please ask me any questions, because compared to other cancers, there's relatively few people got this particular type of cancer in this country. I think it's growing. I think more and more people are getting it. But what we want to do is educate ourselves. We need to create a forum. We need to create a forum where we can express our frustrations, our worries. We can express our emotions. We can have this cathartic release. So please do subscribe and please do drop some questions to me. I'll try and leave some links in the comments at the end. So again, back to this this trial and all of the good videos on YouTube from prominent doctors say if you can get the chance of getting on a trial, jump at it, because it's these trials that are trying all the new drugs, especially for those people in the high risk factors where other drugs don't work. I do. So just to reiterate, I will start an induction cycle of treatment, 4 cycles of treatment starting next week. Each cycle will be for 21 days using the drugs I've just told you about, which are these. Okay. In the second cycle, they will see how these are working and they may introduce a 5th drug. Again, the name escapes me. It begins with ISAT something. But I will update you on that when I have a look at my other literature. Talking about literature, fabulous at Glenclwyd Hospital. I not only got all of this information, these booklets, so many different documents, but I got this folder. If I have, one of the things you'll be very vulnerable to is infections. And if you get an infection, you've got to check, I've been told to use an ear temperature, thermometer. And if I do get a temperature, I've got to immediately phone up the hospital, because quite frankly, it's often infections that kill people with myeloma, if they're bad infections. So I've been told, as soon as my temperature gets to 37.5, I've got to check it again in 40 minutes. If it stays there, I've got to phone the hospital. the chances are I'd have to go up the hospital and get some medication and come home. But if it's bad, they will take you in because it can be life threatening, I've been told. The infections that you get can become life threatening if you don't get in touch. So it's a medical emergency really. If you get an infection, get in touch with your team and make sure if you've got any doubts now, you've got had fatigue for a few years like I had and you're putting it down to getting older, or you've got aches in your body, whatever, make sure you get the doctor to, especially if it's prolonged, get the doctor to get blood tests done and check because it's very subtle in its manifestation at first. I got this big folder. If I have to go into A&E, I've got an emergency card, which will means I'll go straight through into a cubicle. I won't have to wait. I've got numbers of key workers. I've got a 24-hour number. You can see, if I can hold this up, you can see it's literally filled with all sorts of information, which is fabulous. Again, so after the induction period, after this 12-week period where there'll be 4 cycles of 3 weeks of treatment, and each will be adjusted as and when needed. It'll be reviewed over that period of time, and that will sort of lay the land, if you like. Should get my myeloma levels down before I go into hospital to have the cell stem transplantations in Christie's. And again, what that does, basically, first of all, it'd be aggressive chemo to kill the cancer in my bones throughout my skeleton, to kill as much of it as possible off. That's the objective. But in doing so, it also basically kills your immune system off, kills your good blood cells off. So cell stems can be transformed into these good blood cells. So I'm getting what's called autologous autologous cell stem transplantation, which means they're going to use cell cell stems from my own body, good cell stems from my own body, and replant them so they will grow, just like putting a seed in the ground. They will grow into a new immune system, and hopefully, this is where this is where it's so important that my possibly cancer will go into remission, and the hope is it goes into remission for a long time. If it comes back within a couple of years, you've got to go through all the treatment again. If it comes back, it's cyclic, they say anyway at the moment. It will come back in most cases, but because there's no cure, it is terminal at the moment. But they're getting, over the last 10 years alone, the expected lifespan of myeloma patients is getting greater and greater and greater. This week I've been told by people that people who've been 12 years, 14 years and 15 years with myeloma, and they said most of the time you wouldn't even know they've got it. So the treatment is getting fantastic. For other people it's not as good. I suppose if you've got complications and, I'm lucky in that my renal functions are all good, my kidneys, my calcium levels are high, but they're stable at the moment. So I've caught mine, hopefully at a good time, and quite frankly, by luck. So again, if you have any subtle doubts in your mind, phone up your doctor, and then go through these, go through these tests, have them done. Finally, there's another phase to treatment which may be needed after cell stem transplants. I always find it difficult saying that. I always say stem cell, or cell stem, sorry. I mean stem cell transplantations. And apparently the maintenance period can go on for quite a while. And what that does, I think it's a lot lesser dosage of perhaps orally taken chemo tablets, because they might kill off and leave 1 in 100,000, say, cancerous cells in your body, but these can grow again. So they need to keep it at bay. This is my understanding so far, and my understanding is going to grow organically as I go through the process. So I thought I'd make this the first talk of many. And when I have my first treatments, I will tell you how I'm getting on. I will tell you the pros, the cons, the ups and downs. I'll share my upsets with you, and I'll share my triumphs with you as well. Today, I feel exceptionally hopeful, positive. I've looked at so many videos and read so many papers on myeloma. Now I know that the treatment has evolved tremendously um, recently in the last 15 years, because myeloma started a long time ago. I think he said in the 1800s it started, but people's lifespan was very short then. And now it's possible, I think, to live quite a considerably good quality of life for a long time. So that's got to give us all hope. So, on that note, I hope you've enjoyed this talk and keep with me over the next few months, maybe the next few years, and I'll keep adding and giving this information to you. Thanks for listening. My final note is if you do have these subtle doubts, please go and see a health professional. I wouldn't have known otherwise. And if you don't know, it can be too late at times. Go and do it now. Please do subscribe, and I'll speak to you next time we do this. Thank you.